Can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can.
Do you
Thank
see
you
the
very much.
screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Actually, thank you, APGC, and also Mahmoud and Rico for giving me this opportunity to share experience of more than 59 indigenous peoples of Nepal, which comprise around 38% by manufacturing data, but we are more than 50% of the total population of Nepal. Uh, I'm going to talk about in general the title given by the organizer, Decolonizing the Mind in the Post-COVID-19 Era, Perspective from Indigenous Worldview. First, let me give you a little bit brief history of colonization of mind in Nepal. In the concept paper, it has been mentioned that at least from the 16th century and under the banner of nationalism and economic progress, the alternative and original view of the life in indigenous worldview has been ignored or suppressed. That may be true in other parts of the world, but in the case of South Asia, including Nepal and India, we have a very long experience of colonization. It spans around 3,500 to 4,000 years. It's not a joke. But we are able to survive. That itself is a threat to the colonizers because we are still surviving after such a huge, invasion. Now let me quote a work by Professor Uthaya Naidu in his book published in 1999. He gives a detail of the Bible of the Aryan invasion, and he says he writes the quote: the first Aryan invasion involved the annihilation of the Semito-Negroid Sutrapani and Indus Valley civilization by the hordes of Indra and the slaughter of 5 million of its inhabitants. That was during that time. 5 million of its inhabitants, unquote. So Brahmins actually they invented this fourfold Varna, or in English it could be translated as color system, along with the caste system, and then Brahmins colonized the mind of Kshatri, Vaishya, and Sudra, who were below the hierarchy, or the Dalits or the Sudra were at the bottom of the hierarchy. Then, since then, even till now, they not only colonized the caste system, people belonging to Kshatri, Vaishya, and Sudra, but they also colonized the indigenous peoples through this invented fourfold Varna and caste system, which includes very graded hierarchy, and there is the concept of purity and pollution of water, food, and body. So touchability, untouchability, the concept is there. But the COVID has also come up with the concept of touchability and untouchability. But this untouchability is of entirely different nature. But the Brahmins, they invented untouchability based on ascription, not on achievement. But it was 3,000 to 3,500 or 4,000 years ago, right? But Buddha was the first to fight against, to struggle against this inhuman caste system and try to decolonize the minds of individual actually. It was 2,564 years ago. He came up with the theory of impermanence. Nothing is stable, nothing is fixed, everything keeps changing. And then, so the theory of relativity, we relate with Einstein, but Buddha was, he already had propagated that idea 2,500, more than 2,500 years ago. Similarly, science came up with cause and effect relationship after 16th century, but Buddha came up with the, this causal relationship. Every cause has effect, every effect has its cause. And then there are four noble truths. Sorrow is there in the world, and then it has its cause, it has its cure, and the cure is in this world, not in the other world, nether world. And then he propagated the eightfold path. I don't want to get into detail, but he main position was the middle part. Don't go to the extremes. And he suggested to doubt everyone, every idea, not to take it as a taken for granted, and just be critical and keep asking questions and questions and questions until you are satisfied, right? So that was more than 2500 years ago. Uh, but in Nepal, usually in our recent memory, it somehow tally with the Columbus discovery, quote unquote, discovery of America. After Muslim invasion in northern India, many Aryan settlers colonized indigenous peoples in the hills of Nepal. That happened during the 11th to 14th centuries. And then some of the markers of the colonizers were King Drabdesa colonized the Liglikot. It will give you some impression. I'm going into micro detail, but it will give you some kinds of ideas what is going on in Nepal, country like Nepal. And then Pratik Naran Saha is said to have territorial integrated Nepal, the president in Nepal back in 1768. But he actually during the war, he used many inhuman means. Actually, he used genocide also. Not only genocide, but crime against humanity. He cut the indigenous people's nose and ear that weighted around 18 dardis, many kilos. And then Jangabahadur, Prime Minister Jangabahadur, he came up with the old civil code. And then what that did was, it was purely based on Hindu fourfold Barda and caste system. And then indigenous people who never belonged to Hindu hierarchy caste system, we were put legally second in the hierarchy. And then King Mahendra, his project was like one king, and then one language, one race. He was for homogenization, melting pot. But later, after 1990, we had multi-party political system. Political parties emerged. Okay, political parties were there from back in 1950 to 60, and then since 1990, we have multi-party political system. But political parties are controlled by the dominant caste groups, that is Baun Kshetri, and then they have been colonizing for long. They have been colonizing for long. And then the Maoist insurgents, the Maoist insurgency started in 1996 and ended in 2006. But they also colonized the minds of people by saying that we are going to ensure ethnic autonomy and right to self-determination with the right to secession. But in fact, what they did was, because they believe in class and they didn't believe in indigenous people's issues, so they came up with the very fundamentalist racist constitution back in 2015. So first RA rulers, they are like many other rulers in and around the world that we see in many countries. They have coercively implemented the new constitution of 2015, and that constitution explicitly constitutionally guarantees Khas RA racial supremacy, and it completely denies the indigenous people's rights. And then how the colonization of individual mind is being done in Nepal. It's through the socialization. As a sociologist, we all know there are sociological processes that applies, but conditioning, reward and punishment are there by the state and the private companies. Indoctrination through state ideology, political parties, Hindu jurisprudence, Western jurisprudence, language, education, religion, media, cultural practices, science, fashion, media, you name it. These all help to indoctrinate indigenous peoples to be just like the colonizers. And then imitation also is very much in practice. Imitation of friends, imitation of role models also helps to colonize the mind. But the Hindu Brahmin colonizers, they use more than 2300 years old policy that is called Sama, Dana, Danda, Veda. One is you try conciliation and alliances to uh, colonize the mind, and then if not, you give gift or compensation. If not, then punish them or use force or even use arms, and you use the divide and rule policy. So that is how Nepal's indigenous peoples have been colonized. Now, how to decolonize the mind in order to indigenize the original knowledge of the indigenous peoples all around the world? Well, I think first of all, the colonizers, they should do their job, colonizers. And colonization is nothing, no more different than the drug abusers, drug addicts. So what they should do is, like in drug addiction, it is said that there are thousands and millions of ways to get out of drug addiction, but one is the precondition, and that precondition is confession that I'm a drug addict and I need to get out of it. If that doesn't happen, nothing works. So similarly, the colonizers should confess or accept or guilt feel that the colonizers or settlers have robbed, stole, grabbed, damaged indigenous people's collective ways of life, including lands, territories, and resources, customary self-government systems, customary knowledge, skills, and practices, mother tongue, and so on and so forth. That is the first. They must confess, accept, or guilt feel. If that doesn't happen, nothing will work. Second,
One second, there
that
is interruption. Sorry, there is someone on the line, maybe you or someone else. If everybody mute, so that we only hear Dr. Krishna.
Can you hear me?
There is someone who has not muted themselves. Please mute except Krishna. Yeah, now it's muted. Thank you. Sorry, Krishna.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, thank you. So second thing is, there should be realization on the part of colonizers that respecting indigenous people's collective rights is to respect themselves also, is to respect to everyone, to both living and non-living beings. That realization should be there. The third one is, they should be, the colonizers, they will not do that with the know it. The United Nations has come up with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. That must be the state that are controlled by the colonizers. They must implement UN rape in a meaningful way, and those who are not in the state mechanism, they should fully support the UN rape. If that doesn't happen, then the indigenous people will lose more. If indigenous people should lose, then everyone will lose. Well, we indigenous peoples also must do something on our part, but again, the colonizers also should come and help in it. And that is to full respect to the Mother Earth, cosmovisioning, indigenizing, collective consultation leading to consent, resisting against all forms of colonization, capitalism, Marxism, colonial patriarchy, Brahmanism in the case of South Asia, including Nepal, rewriting all the wrongs done by the colonizers, rewriting of history, narratives and stories, reclaiming, revitalizing, restoring, reframing, renaming, reconstructing by deconstructing colonizers' systems, restoring, remembering, and recommitting to hand over collective ways of life to the next generation. And then, in the face of the pandemic, the enlightened philosophy of human progress failed in preventing the spread of the virus. What is the reason for this failure? This is questions from the organizers. My response to that is that, number one, that is the key. Deep structure. We know that destruction of indigenous peoples, land, territories, and resources are one of the causes of COVID-19. And in future, even more deadly virus might erupt and finish the whole humanity or human beings. Who knows? So second is disrespect to the Mother Earth. It has been too much. There is disrespect to the Mother Earth by the colonizers, capitalists, and others. And also third is, indigenous people believe that land and natural resources are not owned by anyone. So no one can buy and sell it for money, profit, or exploitation. So everything, both living and non-living being, have their existence. That must be respected. But to the contrary, The colonizers or settlers or capitalists or Marxists see money in everything, capital in everything, profit in everything. And so either the state owns or the private companies owns or the individual owns, and the indigenous people lose. When indigenous people lose, everybody loses. And then because of that, carbon emission leading to global warming and climate change. So climate change is more deadlier than the COVID-19. That is coming if nothing is done significantly to protect the rights of indigenous peoples. So indigenous peoples are custodians of 80% of the total biodiversity in the world, but the colonizers, settlers, capitalists, Marxists continue to invade in indigenous peoples' land, territories, and resources. So if you look at this picture, what is the reason for this failure? There are so many COVID. Western and Hindu jurisprudence is COVID. Marxism is COVID. Capitalism is COVID. Colonial patriarchy is COVID. Development aggression is COVID. Colonialism is COVID. Brahmanism is COVID. And rulers or political parties who controlled by the dominant caste, ethnic or racial groups are also the COVID. And then our system is very much interconnected. In the center is the lands, territories and resources, and it is interconnected with indigenism, collective way of life, spirits, ancestors, indigenous knowledge, skills, technology, practice, language, culture, customary law, indigenous jurisprudence, kinship-based egalitarian society. Everything is interconnected, and there is attack from each and every front. So indigenous people are really have to fight hard in order to survive. Now, just one more slide here. What new insights can indigenous approach to social organization and economic system provides for their own societies and others? My response to that question is that everyone needs to honor cosmovision of indigenous people, fully respect the great spirits and ancestors, and also to the future generations. And we should respect the distinct place and interconnectedness of living, non-living, and spiritual beings. And we should respect the close relationship with lands, territories, and resources, a relationship that goes beyond economic needs, as these are sacred and have social, cultural, and spiritual dimensions. So we need to honor spiritual, physical, emotional, and mental aspects of individual and community. We should honor interconnection of past, present, and future. And each member of the collective should be a citizen, leader, advocate, decision maker, custodian, defender, and beneficiary. Each and every member should be everything actually. And then sharing, reciprocity, and redistribution should be there. Ours is an egalitarian society, but colonial patriarchy has damaged so much that now more inequality and more violence are going on. So indigenous jurisprudence and indigenous justice system based on restorative justice is best in the world. That must be adopted by all. Why the Western justice system? Why the Hindu jurisprudence? These all are nonsense actually. So free, prior and informed consent must be respected. If any administrative or legal intervention should be done, then the state or private business companies, they should obtain free, prior and informed consent. Until now, it has been evaded everywhere. In Nepal also, that's why more and more conflicts are emerging. Indigenous people system is more collective, participatory, deliberative, communitarian democracy and decision making that can be scaled up, and it could be scaled up to the state and the regional and other levels as well. And then there should be intergenerational transfer of knowledge that has been adopted. Now, recently, 20 of our fellows who have joined in indigenous knowledge transfer course, they were very worried that their generation could be the last not to be able to transfer the collective way of life that was transferred by the previous generation to the next generation. And then there should be full respect for mother tongues. It's dying out every day. And then indigenous people believe that circularity, it is not step by step, like Marx said, first slavery and then feudalism and then capitalism, and then socialism, and then communism. That is not the case. Indigenous peoples already practice communism. Raute, they still do practice communism. But the Maoists, I mean, they started armed revolution, armed insurgency, and then more than 17,000 lives were lost for nothing, for the fundamentalism, to bring back the fundamentalism, to bring back the racism, caste RA supremacy. But the indigenous peoples, communism is being, say, at the verge of extinction, right? So, to end, I would say, we would say, from part of Nepal's indigenous peoples were the first nation. We indigenous peoples were the first nation, are the first nation, and we will be the last nation in this mother earth. Thank you very much.